NESGameMaker. Thank you for joining me again for another episode of Working with Enemy AI. So let's get cracking on this. Last time we set up the last of our enemies, the dealer, or the spider. Was dealers ever used again later on in the Zelda series? I don't remember. So I don't remember ever seeing them. Well, I probably have, but I just didn't remember seeing it. Anyway, so we have a bunch of enemies: Bit, Bot, Dealer, Moblin, and Moblin. But currently, we don't have anything to do with them. So we want to be able to spawn them finally in our room so that we can actually test them out, see how they work. So go into your main room here if you haven't already, and just delete anything that might get in the way of our testing here, because our enemies aren't exactly clever when it comes to avoiding obstacles. We just want Link in there. That should be all. And of course our floor. Make sure you have a floor. And come back over here, and we got our bit spawner. So we have bit and bot and all that fun stuff. Let me move this way and pop open the spawners here. So to start with, we have to figure out a little bit of information for our player, for our spawner here. Such as the distance to the player and your assigned instance. All right, so what are those going to be used for? Well, it'll be over here. Very simple. The player to the distance to the player is updated. So if link side scrolling exists, then the distance to the player is equal to the distance to object from the spawner to the side scrolling link object. Otherwise, it's 0. Just keep in our mind our safety for checking to make sure our instance of interest exists. Spawn monsters as appropriate if assigned instance is equal to no one. So if I haven't spawned a monster yet, then if the player is within 256 pixels of me, create a bit at my XY location. Otherwise, track to make sure that bit still exists. If that bit does not exist any longer, so if the player has killed the bit, then set my assigned assistant instance back to no one so that we can spawn another bit as appropriate. Oh wait, I have this backwards here. It's not if the player is within 256 pixels, it's if the player is 256 pixels away. Because we want these enemies to spawn off screen from the player. And this is how it works in the game. If you are in a battle room and you are walking back and forth, bits will spawn as soon as you get far enough away at their spawner locations. And they basically, the reason why I know this, because I moved really, really fast, and you can see they'll spawn in the exact same place every single time in the room, and yeah. They only spawn once you get a certain distance away from the spawning location. And the reason why they remember, so with these guys, do they? Well, yeah, they don't have a pausing setup like some of our other enemies for if the player is far enough away, but they'll do. All right, let's go ahead and put this into our room here. So we want bits to spawn near the ground, so we'll just put this on the ground here, I believe. Let me check my game here. Pull up a battle room. Enemies. No, instances. Oh. Okay, yeah. So the spawner needs a image, actually. So we'll give these an image. And before we actually go any further, we also want a bot spawner. So The bit spawner and the bot spawner are exactly the same. They just change the name of the enemy that we're spawning. So duplicate, and you are bot. Step bot, and we'll give you a nice picture. Enemies, bit and bot, give you bot idle, and for you, give you sprites, enemies, bit bot, bit idle. Come into our room, so that'll make it easier to work with. So now we know exactly where they're going. Bit and bot both would spawn right there. So just to make it easier, we'll put one right here, one right here. There shouldn't be any spawns when we first get into the room. But if we move Link all the way over to the right here, then let's make sure we have enough pixels, I hope. We'll give it a try, see how well this works. Hopefully the game doesn't crash when it tries to spawn something. Alright, there's our spawners. They're currently visible because we didn't set them to be invisible. Gone as far away as I can. And there's our bit. Let's kill him. There we go. Now he's dead. And go as far as we can away. Let's see if we can get our bot to spawn. And there's our bot. And his little jump, and he did a little pause when you attacked him. Alright, so those both work perfectly. Great. So now we can actually spawn some enemies, but remember we were talking about our enemies having like a death thing happen, right? Well, let's see if we can actually fix that and make it happen now, because we want to actually have these death explosions do something finally. So let's go over into our effects if you don't have it. So what we have here is the item dropping death explosion. So when the enemy dies, he creates a couple of death explosions, and one of them will drop a item once the explosion effect finishes. So let's come over here to effects, give you the effect, and a create event, and a draw end event. So under here, experience underscore is equal to 0. It's going to grab experience when the object dies, when the enemy dies. So when Bit dies, he tells the item dropping death explosion how much experience it should get based on the experience that we've set up right here. Oops. Pop that open again. Go back down here. And in the draw end event, we're going to need to put in a little bit of stuff here for our loot rolling. So once the animation event, so the reason why we're doing this as a draw end is so that it'll draw the last frame of the explosion, and then it will decide what item to actually draw on that last frame that the explosion exists. So it says var underscore loot is undefined. What loot are we going to give it? So if experience does not equal 0, then we want to give them an experience drop. But if loot does not equal undefined, then we want to drop a loot object for them instead. So let's see if I have this here. So yeah, that's basically the same right there. So we set ourselves up to have an experience. If the enemy has relayed an experience drop to us, that's the spawner, not the enemy. So currently I have it set up so that Bit and Bot only are dropping experience for the player, because I didn't really code in any item drops for the game here, so unfortunately didn't really have enough time. But so currently he is dropping experience, and that's all he's dropping. But if he was dropping items, I'd set something like if percentage of chance. Well, not even that. In Zelda 2, there is a system where every 6 drops or something like that, it will every 6 times you kill an enemy, it will. There's like classes of enemies. Like this is a easy enemy, a medium enemy, and a hard enemy. And if you kill 6 easy enemies, then it'll drop either a small mana restore item or a small experience bag or something like that. So yeah, so what I'd have to do is set up a system where it goes and checks into the game object. So we'd have to have some sort of game object that tracks, or actually we'd put it over here in our save object. So in our save, we'd have how many easy enemy kills we've had so far, how many medium enemy kills we've had so far, how many hard enemy kills we've had so far, so we can track how many of each one of them we've had. Then we would drop if we've reached the threshold of how many enemy kills there are, then we'd drop an item, which would then be randomly, semi-randomly chosen. I think it's like a 1 out of 6 chance of getting a P bag versus getting a potion or something like that. I'm just making these numbers up. I have them written down somewhere in here, the actual numbers. Maybe I'll find them when we're working on all this, but we'll see. Anyways, so basically here we have an experience drop or loot drop. Okay, it's probably over here in the loot drop item. Let's go over to the experience drop. So create a new object here. obj underscore experience underscore drop. And it's not going to have a sprite or anything, because what we're going to do is we're going to make it have a just a little effect of a number rising into the air and then disappearing after a couple of frames. So create a step and a draw in the create event. So let's close all but this, and let's pop open bot again so that we can see what's going on, and the death drop. So if this happens, we create an experience drop and we set the experience to experience again. We're kind of relaying this information around in ways that I don't know if are actually efficient, but you know, it's happening and it works. So we come over here, set your experience to that, time to live, sec times 0.5, so it lasts for about 0.5 seconds. And this is how fast it floats around, so at 0.5 frame per second, y per second, or per frame. And applied y speed, y fraction. I don't know why I did all that. Oh yeah, well, I could have done that even better, even simpler. All right, well, whatever. So time to live is less than or equal to 0. So once we've died, then actually give my player the experience at this point. So we set the target experience for our player to we add the experience to it. The reason why we have this target experience variable is because let's say we have 0 experience and we now have a target experience of 50. Then in our GUI, what we do is we lerp the actual experience value towards the target experience value. That way you have the counting up effect of counting up your experience points. And then we destroy the instance because we don't need you anymore. In the meantime, we apply your Y speed plus float speed fraction. Just basically we're saying every other frame give us +1. I didn't need to do this. I could because precision doesn't matter in this case. So I could actually just eliminate all this and just y plus equal float speed. There we go. That's all I really needed. I don't know why I was going overboard on there, but apparently I did. Anyway, so time to live minus. So that'll count down how long we have to live. And draw. Very simple. just set our font to the global dot font, which is the Zelda font, which we previously set up back at the beginning of the game, I believe. FA center, FA middle, C underscore white. Remember, this is a custom function I set up, which basically combines all of these functions into one because it's annoying having to write them all out. So I just made it all one. Draw text, XY, string experience. Very simple, right? So we have that, but we also have back over here we have object loot drop. So we're going to need to make another object. OJ underscore loot underscore drop. So if we end up with a loot system, this is how we'll do the loot drops. All right, got our 3 events. Create. It's basically like the experience drop, except we say drop undefined and step. Well, we don't actually need anything because it basically immediately drops. In fact, I don't even think we really need this because we can just spawn the item directly instead of having a loot drop. Oh, that is what is happening here. This is the loot drop. So if we actually had a loot drop, we'd spawn this loot drop instead. Yeah, these are both empty. And so this would basically you could take it, and based on what your drop is, you would then change the sprite and what actual value you'd give the player when they pick it up, etc., etc. You know, that kind of stuff. It's basically like having a parent loot drop, except instead you do it all as a single object. So so here's some notes about all that loot dropping that I was talking about. Come over here to the create event. I'll just stick that in so you can take a look at it if you feel like it. So 3 drop groups, none equals no experience or 200 experience enemies. Small is anything under 30, large is anything else. Small drops are 7 out of 8 and a 1 out of 8 for a 50p bag. Large drops are 50-50 red jar, 200. Each group has 6 kill counters. When it's reached a drop is produced, the counters do not affect the counters of other groups. And these will be tracked in the player save data, but not saved. So, you know, if you restart the game, it won't think that you have 7 out of 8 kills, so you can immediately get a new kill. So, also experience counts as a drop, kind of, in that the 6 kill drop will override the experience you normally get. So, yeah. That's why I came up with the system that I did. So, anyways, we now have the item dropping Death Explosion. So, we actually want to duplicate this. And we're going to call this the non-item dropping Death Explosion. Let's get rid of that because we don't want the numbers that it automatically generates. For this, delete the create event. We just want, when the animation ends, that the explosion should delete itself. All right, let's take a look at our time here. We're currently at 1850. That's great, perfect time. Let's give this one more check here because we now have a couple of spawners, and let's put them over here, create some enemies for Link, and see how the death explosions work and get ourselves some experience or something, right? So let's make sure we get far enough away to spawn some enemies. There we go. Nice. 9,999 XP. Can't beat that, right? Alright, so let's close all this up. Thank you, everybody, for joining me for this episode today. Let's see. Next time, we'll add in some spawners for additional enemies, such as the Moblin, and then we'll work on the Moblin and the Dealer. They actually don't have spawners. They're just sort of have a set position in the room, and they don't respawn until at such time that then you clear the area. So if you're in the temple and you kill a skeleton won't respawn until you leave the temple again, and then you come back into the temple. Then it'll respawn at that point, but otherwise it won't. So yeah, I'll have to show you all that stuff later on. So let's take it away past me with some Patreon names, and thank you very much for watching. I'd like to thank my Legacy Patreon sponsors who supported me last season during the hiatus: Jens Burton, JD Lowe, Suli, and Vazia. I'd of course also like to extend my thanks to my current Patreon sponsors: Kenneth Klein, Confusion, Jamal, Fernando, Sir Jez, and lastly, Amy. Thank you everybody for supporting the NESGameMaker. You really help it all happen. And remember, good luck with your program.